All right, we're getting towards the end of spring. It's been a very wet spring, and we're transitioning into summer. So let's provide a summer outlook of what we can be expecting. And one thing I can tell you for sure, it's not going to be as much rain as what we've gotten over the last 2 months. It's been a monsoon, Jamie.
Well, you say that. You just need one. You need one tropical system to park itself, or maybe two tropical systems to
Don't
park
you put that
themselves.
curse on us. We're at 20 inches of rain.
Another way it can happen is you can get a front that just gets stuck over the area, and you get dumped on over multiple waves of thunderstorms. Never say never, right? But yeah, you mentioned the here we are at the close of the spring season, the meteorological spring, which is March, April, May, and then we get into meteorological summer, which is June, July, and August. A lot of folks are wondering, and I've had this question actually posed to me.
Yeah.
Rain, it's been significantly higher than normal in April and May. What does that mean? Does that mean anything?
Yep.
Looking back at past years, can you find years where you had similar springs, and then what was the outcome over the summer? And so that's kind of what we wanted to get into tonight.
We did that. We did the research, and let's first start off by what the Climate Prediction Center is saying. This is not our forecast. I think we actually disagree with this forecast in places, but this is
in a
probably,
way, yes.
This is what you'll see probably most posted around when people are saying, hey, this is going to be the outlook for the summer, and they're calling for everyone in the United States to have above average temperatures. Something worth mentioning is they're kind of saying if there's going to be anywhere that's going to be colder or close to normal, they are highlighting the Midwest as an area where they think that could be possible.
I think they're going to, and the point, Matt and I were talking about this, one of the things is they're going to lean warmer than normal just because of climate trends.
Yes.
I think that they're going to hedge their bets in that direction. So I think that that's what we're seeing in this forecast.
Yeah, we don't want to get into an argument about climate change or anything like that, but they are kind of forecasting warmer temperatures across the United States. But we have looked at analog years, and we looked at years where we got a whole lot of rain in April, got a whole lot of rain in May that matches the pattern of what we got in this year. And one of those years, Jamie, that you really brought out was 2017.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the data into it. And the big number that you really need to pay attention to is April in 2017, we got a foot of rainfall. Mm-hmm. You compare that to April of 2025, and we got, well, a little more than a foot of rainfall, about 13 inches of rain. May of 2017, very similar pattern, where we got 7 inches of rain. And May of 2025, this isn't factoring in the rain that we got today. That will bump us to about 7 inches of rain. So
7.5 inches, yeah.
So the rain is matching up. The temperatures in 2017 is matching up. So what kind of happened in 2017,
and so like what you're pointing out right there, it's like, oh, that's kind of anecdotal. I mean, coincidence, okay. So then you look and see, okay, are the driving forces in that year the same as the driving forces this year? And one of the things that, that when we're talking about seasonal forecasts, we're always going to factor in the state of Enso, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. Now, what Matt has pulled up right there is you're looking at the 3-month mean of the Enso state. Is it normal? Is it above normal? Is it below normal? And so last winter, we had a relatively strong El Nino. Going into this past winter, we saw the makings of a La Nina. I don't think it ever technically met the definition. You didn't have 3 running periods consecutively with 0.5 degrees below normal in a row. That didn't happen.
You used a term I wasn't familiar with, but I think it's perfect. A lanada, where it's close to a La Nina.
And I didn't coin that. I mean, that's been thrown around out there.
So that's kind of the setup of what we had, where temperatures just a pinch colder, and you go back to 2017, pretty similar situation where you can kind of see, if anything, maybe a little bit more aggressive.
So you look at what I would look at is okay, where are we now versus where we were then? But then you also want to see what state was Enso in the previous year. I mean, what were you coming out of into the state that you find yourself in? So last winter we had El Nino. Well, if you look back to 2016, before
strong El Nino,
it was a strong El Nino. So it's very parallel.
Yes,
the Enso state is very parallel in that period versus what we're looking at now. And then so we then look further back in time and we find not a whole lot of years, but there were other years that have very similar patterns in terms of Enso, where you go from an El Nino into what would be maybe a weak La Nina or La Nada state, neutral Enso state for the winter season, and that's what we kind of look at. And then the next step is, and Matt kind of did this just looking at the precipitation patterns. We found, a great analog to this spring and now probably going into this summer is 2017. And interestingly enough, back in 2017, it was a spring of heavy rain. There were waves of severe weather, but heavy rain was the big headline.
Yep.
That was a spring in April, especially, where you had big rainstorms that produced flash flooding, especially toward the end of April. So that is a strong parallel, that spring in 2017, to what we've had this spring. The Enso state in 2016 going into 2017, very similar to the Enso state that we have from this past year going into this winter and now spring. So you're looking at two different periods that have very strong similarities. I found other years that had similarities, and just using the summer of 2017, June to August of 2017, this is what we find. This is the average, the temperature average. Actually, you're looking at the anomalies when you're looking at the temperature average for that summer, and we find that warmer than normal conditions blanketed the western U.S., cooler than normal conditions blanketed the middle and eastern portion of the nation.
There's almost an east-west divide. And so this is really for people that love the forecast, love digging into why we say what there are. There's some people that just want to know, is it going to be hotter or colder?
Yeah.
This is really a video for people that want to know why we think what we do, the science that goes behind it. And 2017 was a year that looked very similar to what we just experienced in 2025.
And here's the thing, I want to make this point too. We don't just, so when we're forecasting, we don't just go, well, what did the model say?
Yeah.
And then run with it, because that's not a forecast.
Yep.
That's taking one piece of guidance and then using that as gospel. There's so much guidance out there. I mean, you could cherry pick the solution that you want, because all of the guidance tends to have varying solutions.
Well, with the models, we can dig into this in a bit. There's really three that you can kind of trust for seasonal data. Two of them are saying one thing, one of them saying the other. So no matter what, you can say, well, the model got it right, or you could say, no matter what, the model got it wrong. That's why we like to provide explanations on this. But 2017 ended up being a cooler than average number. I think, Jamie, you have the kind of data right there of 2017.
Looking at the numbers from 2017,
Wonder if
it was generally a cooler than normal summer.
I'm going to try to flip the camera down.
And I think that, Matt, it's also important to make this point, and that is, if you have a very wet spring, you've got to dry out before it can really heat up in June. So that kind of takes June off the table in terms of being a hotter than normal month. Yeah. We've had so much rain. We're going to go into June with a wet pattern for the first week at least. And so I think what we're going to see is that June is going to tend to run at the end of the month. By the end of the month, we're probably going to see near normal temperatures.
Start to ramp up towards the end. Things will dry out. The grass will get a little bit more brown.
Yeah.
That's a typical pattern.
Exactly. And then I think once we get into July, and this is what we found. Okay, so looking at June of 2017, very wet in May. We get into June of 2017, and it's still wet. We had 5 inches for the month. The normal is 4.85, so a little bit above normal
for June. Okay.
For that June. Now, now temperature departures, they were almost negligible. It was less than a half a degree above normal.
Okay.
So that's what we're getting at. Wet spring this spring. We're going into June wet. At the end of the day, we're probably looking at near normal temperatures for June. Once we got to July, things dried out. July in 2017 was a dry month. We had less than 2 inches of rainfall. In the summer, that's not much.
Yeah.
It wound up being 1.5 degrees above normal.
Okay.
So we had a hotter than normal July. Didn't hit 100, but we had a hotter than normal July. Then we got into August. And in August, we found a very cool month of August. It ran over 4 degrees below normal. We had over 7 inches of rainfall in August. Now, is summer of 2025 going to play out exactly the same way? Probably not.
Yeah.
But I think what we're going to see is that it's going to take a while to dry out. And because it's going to take a while to dry out, June, I think, is going to lean near normal, if not a little bit below as a result. Now, July, by that point, we're drying out. It's probably going to be hotter, and it may be a little hotter than normal. And then we get to August, and I think just the overall structure of global patterns is going to push August back into a cool phase. And we'll see August running cooler than normal. I think all of that said, when you look at a seasonal forecast, even though we think that it will tend to run cooler than normal, that does not mean that you couldn't have a hotter than normal month in there.
Of course, obviously.
Doesn't mean that you're not going to have. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have hot streaks of weather. You will. It's just that overall, when you average everything out, it looks like this summer will run cooler than normal, and it may actually lean a little wetter than normal too.
Well, we've been seeing, we've been having really warm months. You know, we've been hitting kind of record months, and the big reason why we mentioned this earlier is it's not the highs that are getting really warmer than what we've seen before. It's the lows that get warmer. So kind of your floor is raising, your ceiling staying roughly the same. So we're not saying, hey, you're not going to have 90-degree days. You're going to have 90-degree days with hot humidity. That's the Ozarks. You know, we just think overall the trend going into this year will be a little bit cooler than kind of what we got last year, and definitely some summers before where we have some real heaters once we get into the middle of the year. Do want to dig kind of into the models real quickly. Don't take models as gossip. We try to provide a reasoning for our forecast, but this is some models that do agree with us.
And so, and that's what you're looking for. I mean, you're like, okay, well, we're looking for we're looking at history and we're finding analogs, and does any of the seasonal guidance support that? And then when you find that it does support it, it makes you feel stronger about your conclusion. And Matt, go ahead.
Well, I mean, you got to think of the models just as one big giant calculator. And sometimes if you have bad information coming in, you're going to get bad information coming out. But this is I believe, the Canadian, and it is calling for kind of a swath of cooler temperatures.
This is actually the American. This is the American.
Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah. You can almost see this kind of divide where it's warmer to the west, cooler to the east, which is kind of similar to what we saw in 2017. This is, again, for June, July, August. Let me pull this over for... the Euro is one of those that kind of disagrees.
Yeah.
This is the one outlier that is saying, no, we think it's going to be hot. So
that the guidance right there, what the Euro would imply, the European model would imply, is that you're going to have one of those summer ridges setting up over the middle of the country. To get that kind of temperature pattern, you're going to have a summer ridge sitting over the middle of the country. That to me flies in the face of years where you have similar patterns. I think with the overall setup, I think you're going to have a tendency of a trough being located in the middle of the country, upper Midwest, into the eastern U.S.
You call them summer ridges. I think Tom calls them the death ridge. I think I call them ring of fires. It's just you get locked into a pattern in the summer where it's 2 straight weeks of just dry, hot, sunny weather that just persists and persists. So that's what you kind of mean with that ring of fire. You call it what, summer ridge?
It's a summer
ridge.
I don't. It's like for what I don't really want to call it a death ridge. I know it seems dramatic. It seems kind of a little over the top for me, but
The Canadian is one of those that are also kind of calling for warmer to the west, cooler to the east, and Missouri is one of that areas that gets cooler temperatures. So this is the hard part about the forecasting is you got different models saying different things. You're going back, you're checking kind of analog years into the past. I feel comfortable with our forecast, and definitely that's why I like doing these longer form videos, so we can explain why. Because I imagine people are going to say, well, Climate Prediction Center is saying it's going to be warmer. You guys are saying colder. And it's, this is why we're into
Matt,
there.
Okay, so, to kind of wrap up the model part of this.
Yeah.
So 2 out of the 3 models, seasonal models that we're looking at, support our ideas. Support them in a way where it's like, that makes sense. The cooler the normal conditions are where you would expect them to be based on the pattern that you're expecting. So, I don't want to toss the Euro out, but we've got 2 seasonal models that support what we're saying and one does not. Let's go back to the Climate Prediction Center's outlook for the summer. And while they are calling for warmer than normal conditions across the nation, where are they calling for the least chance of it being
You
warmer
can
than normal.
still kind of see this west-east divide.
Yep.
Now, they're saying we think everyone's going to be warm, but they are saying we think warmer to the west,
Yes.
maybe a little bit cooler to the east. So that does match. I just think they're a little bit more
so
aggressive
you're seeing,
with.
I mean, they're hedging their bets.
Yeah.
They're going warmer, and I think they're basing that on climate trends. But they're telling you in that forecast that if there's going to be a spot in the country that will lean cooler than normal at points during the summer, it's right there, which also matches up nicely with what we're thinking and also what a couple of the different seasonal models are saying.
I think that sums it up. Anything else you want to add, kind of throw in?
At this stage, I'm ready for spring to be done. It has been a very active, wet spring. Matt, looking at the first week of June, it looks like a lot of times the spring severe weather season wraps up in that first week to maybe
first,
2
second
weeks.
Week, yep.
I have a buddy over in Joplin, Doug Hetty. He'd always say June 10th is the cutoff, and I agree with him. And this year, it looks like we're going to run it all the way up to June the 10th, maybe even a little bit past, because it looks like over the first week of June, there is a pattern across the nation that will support more active weather and the potential of maybe even more heavy rainfall.
Yeah, we are expecting a couple opportunities for storms that first week in June. I know farmers want to do their hay. They're sick of this rain. I want to be by the swimming pool. I want to get a nice sunburn. I'm ready for summer. So that's kind of our thoughts on the summer outlook. Let us know what you guys think. Kind of, I guess, what side are you cheering for? You want in a hot summer? You want cooler temperatures? Let us know. But that's kind of our thoughts on what we can expect for 2025. Thanks for watching, guys.